I'm going to start a poem, A Cry from Africa by Derek Walcott. Now, before starting this poem, I have already given you a brief introduction about post colonial literature. So, please watch that video first and then come to this video, otherwise, it will be a little bit difficult for you to relate with the themes that we are going to discuss. Very briefly, something about the poet Derek Walcott. Walcott is basically a mixed racial poet. His grandfather was an European, a Britisher, and his grandmother was an African. So he has both the bloods of Africa and England mixed together. He lived in the island of St. Lucia, which is located near the coast of Africa. And in this particular poem, he is speaking about Kenya. So I am sure you are familiar with the country Kenya, which is located in Africa. And here, the approach of the poet is quite different from the typical presentation of Africa by the other African poets. You will see in the poetry of most of the African poets, the poets express a sense of pride that they belong to the race of the Africans. Africa was the continent where it is believed that 4 million years ago first human life form appeared. So gradually Africans developed, various tribes in Africa developed, and they had a very strong, a very powerful indigenous culture till the Britishers came and gradually spread their colonial rule in Africa. And thereafter, after the coming of the Britishers and other European powers, the Africans offered a strong resistance. They fought for their independence, and ultimately most of the countries in Africa have received their independence. So this ancient history of Africa and its heritage of struggle against the colonial power is a matter of great pride and celebration for most of the poets. But we see that Derek Walcott is having altogether a very different view on the same situation, on the situation of the post colonial society in Africa as well as the colonial struggle. Now, Walcott is a Nobel Prize winner poet, and he is mainly writing here in this particular poem about his vision, about his view of the Mao Mao Uprising. In Africa, there is a tribe which is called the Kikiyu Tribe. This tribe is one of the main tribes of Africa. You know, Africa has a number of tribes, and Kikiyu is such a Bantu tribe, a part of the Bantu tribe that lives in Africa. And when the Britishers tried to capture Africa, when the Britishers tried to import Africa, these Kikiyu people tried to revolt against the British rule and overthrow the British rule. So with the Mao Mao Uprising, there was a great clash between the Britishers as well as the Kikiyu people. In this poem, we are getting that Mao Mao Uprising as the background. So let us start the poem and then we will discuss other related issues. A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa. Kikiyu, quick as flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt. So this poem is slightly difficult for us to understand because it has a number of images and metaphors used. Rather, it is built up on a series of metaphors, and if you don't understand these metaphors properly, you will not be able to understand the poem at all. So I have given you the word meanings in the screen itself so that you can understand it easily. Ruffling means to disarrange. So just imagine when you are standing in the wind, when you are facing a storm, what happens to your hair? It completely becomes disheveled, it becomes disarranged. And then there is another complicated expression in the first line, tawny pelt. Tawny is used to describe a color which is yellowish brown. In the second, in the screen, You can see the Kikiyu tribe is presented here. They are wearing a kind of dress which has this same color, the brownish yellow color. Pelt normally means the skin of an animal. It can also refer to the fur in the body of an animal, and tawny pelt can refer to a lion, because if you see the picture, if you see the color of the dress that that woman is wearing, you will understand it is very much similar to the skin of a lion. So the tawny pelt can refer to the fur in the body of a lion. Now, the poet is saying tawny pelt of Africa. That means he is clearly using a metaphor to compare Africa with a lion. Now, why is this continent of Africa referred to as a lion? Simply because lion is wild, lion is untamable, and also it is considered as the grand king of the jungle. So Africa is also the African continent, and the people of Africa are also wide. They are untamable, they have an untamable energy in them, and they are considered as the most ancient citizens of this world. So they have a grand presence, truly. So that is why, in order to celebrate the grandeur of African people, the poet is comparing Africa to a tawny pelt, that is a lion. And the wind or the storm is disarranging the fur in the body of the lion. The lion has the manes around his head, and that the manes of the lion are getting disarranged by the wind. Now this whole image is again a metaphor. The wind is basically referring to the British people. They are the outsiders who have come to Africa, and they have started disarranging the lives of the people of Africa. So in order to explain that concept, how the Britishers came and scattered everything, the whole beautiful civilization of Africa was totally disarranged, totally destroyed by the arrival of the colonial powers. So the colonial powers are compared to a powerful storm that came to Africa and completely disarranged its tawny pelt. So in the simple, this means that the wind is blowing very hard, and because of the storm, the manes of the lion, the fur of the lion is getting disarranged. But the inner meaning is that the Britishers, who are compared to the wind, when they came to Africa, they totally disarranged, they totally destroyed the peaceful existence in Africa, they totally destroyed the harmony of Africa. Kikiyu, quick as flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt. So I told you who are the Kikiyu people. They are a group of Bantu people, one of the most ancient tribes of Africa. And these Kikiyu people had organized an uprising which is called the Mao Mao Uprising. And as they were fighting with the Britishers were using the most modern weapons to fight. For example, the cannons and the bullets and the guns, and the Kikiyu people were still fighting with bows and arrows. So it is almost like the Santal uprising in West Bengal and Jharkhand region of India, when the Britishers were trying to capture this area after coming to India. The Santal community also revolted. Very bravely they fought against the Britishers, but of course the Britishers had much more sophisticated weapons, so it was easier for them to crush the uprising down. Similarly, in Africa also, the Kikiyu tribe on the British soldiers, but the Britishers had much more powerful weapons, and therefore the Kikiyu tribe appeared as flies in front of a wind. What happens when a strong wind blows? The flies and mosquitoes are totally blown away. Similarly, in front of the strong wind, which is obviously the Britishers, the Kikiyu tribe, the people of the tribe, were just blown away like flies and mosquitoes. And then their dead bodies were scattered all around the veldt. Now, what is the veldt? Veldts are the grasslands of Africa. Basically, the biome that surrounds us, the biological area that surrounds us, can be divided into four categories. Geographically speaking, one is the grassland where the grasses grow and very important for the grazing of the cattle rearing. Then there is the forest biome, there is the desert biome, and then the aquatic, the waterland biome. So uh, the grasslands of Africa are very important for the survival of the tribes because they have a wide variety of animals, and these grasses are important for the survival of the domestic animals also. So these grasslands of America, which are beautiful, which are pure, which are green in color, are littered, spoiled by the which is an effect of the uprising. As a result of the uprising, so many people are killed in the uprising that their dead bodies are spread all around the world. Corpses are scattered through a paradise. Corpses means, dead body, and scattered means spread, and paradise is of course referring to Africa. So Africa, which was till now like a paradise, a heaven on earth, it really had untouched natural beauty, but that natural beauty of Africa was totally destroyed by the dead bodies spread all around because of the violence that was created by the Britishers. So the dead bodies, the corpses, scattered all through the paradise of Africa. Only the worm, kernel of carrion, cries, waste no compassion on these separate dead. So when there are so many dead bodies, obviously the worms and insects will be very happy. Their whole team comes up, and their commander, their leader, gives order to the insects, to the worms, that come and enjoy each and every dead body. This is like a feast for us, this is like a grand treat for us. So many dead bodies are there, we can eat, we will have a lot of food to eat. So many worms and insects gather around the dead bodies which are scattered in the grasslands, and the commander orders them that go and enjoy each and every dead body. Don't have any compassion for any of them, whether it is the dead body of an African or it is the dead body of an European. Don't bother about them, don't distinguish between them, just enjoy your food. So who are these worms? The worms are basically the Englishmen, the Britishers, because they have come from outside and they are now feasting on the death of the Africans. They are celebrating the death of the Africans, not showing any mercy to the people, not showing any mercy to their dead bodies also, and shamelessly violating the African people. And that is why the poet is comparing the Britishers as worms, as insects who come and feast on the dead body of others. And the insects, within quotation there is a line, waste no compassion on these separate dead. So the poet is trying to say that the insects are so brutal, so merciless, that they do not even bother that these are the dead bodies of the great warriors, the great soldiers who had sacrificed their lives for their nation. Well, their sacrifice did not get rewarded, rather it was eaten up by worms without any respect, without any honor. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. Now, after the uprising, after the battle is over, the statistics give the data. The statistics is mainly concerned about the data: how many people died, how many people alive, how many dead bodies recovered, how many dead bodies lost. All these data are published in the statistical books or records, or maybe in the newspapers, and the scholars of history, they are busy, they seize that opportunity, they grab that opportunity to start their analysis. Why this uprising took place, who was responsible behind this uprising. So they get the food for thought, they get the opportunity to do some historical research on the analysis, on the war. So the statisticians, they are collecting data, they are busy to collect data and justify the uprising, and the historians, they are busy to analyze the effect of this battle, the cause of this battle, the consequence of this battle, and they are trying to find out how the colonial policies, the salients, the features of the colonial policy caused this battle. Basically, this was the mismanagement of the British colonizers that created this battle. So the war would not have been started in the first place if the colonizers did not come. Secondly, the colonizers came and imposed some very wrong policies on the people of Africa. They started forcing the people of Africa to surrender their lands. The people of Africa lost their livelihood because of the wrong colonial policies. So the historians sit and analyze how wrong the colonial policies were, as a result of which this war took place, this revolt took place. So they discuss the salients, the features of the colonial policy. But our poet is raising a question. He says, what is that to the white child hacked in bed? But does that have really any meaning or significance? The statistical data of how many people lived and how many people died, the research of the historians on the effect of the colonial policies in the lives of African people, do they really have any impact? Because ultimately war is all about violence, war is all about death and destruction. He is giving one example, a real example that had happened during the Mao Mao Uprising. The tribals had become so angry on the Britishers that they lost all human sympathy or all human virtues. They attacked the Britishers wherever they could, wherever they got the opportunity, and even killed the little children or even the women who had no role to play in the British suppression or British domination. An innocent child sleeping in his bed was killed by the Kikiyu people only because his skin color was white, only because he was an European child. So that is why our poet is raising a humanitarian question, that the Kikiyu people are fighting for their land, the Britishers are fighting to capture their land, the statisticians are trying to justify with their data, the historians are trying to analyze the failure of the colonial policy. But who is the real victim of this violence? The people, child, the innocent little child who was hacked to death, who was cut into pieces by the violence of the war. So it is the innocent who suffers. It is the ceremony of the innocents that is drowned everywhere. So as W.B. Yeats had said in Second Coming, to savages expendable as Jews. Now, savages are referred to the African people. Normally the word savage means the barbaric tribes, the barbarian people who are uncivilized, uncultured. In those days, during the colonial period, the colonizers used to call the native people savages. So it may be in Australia, in India, in America, or in Africa, the native people, the tribal people were called savages by the European, because they do not dress up like the European, they do not look like the European, they do not behave like the European, they don't know the European courtesies and manners. That is why they are called uncivilized and uncultured savages. So our poet is not using the term savage to describe the Africans for insulting them, not in a derogatory sense, but because normally the Europeans use the term savages to describe the African people. That is why he is using. So he says these savages, these uncivilized people, they are like the Jews. Their condition is like the Jews in the hands of Hitler. So now this is an allusion. We are getting a reference to the Jews under the rule of Hitler during the Second World War. We have studied Lady Lazarus, so we know something about the Jews. We know that Hitler considered the Aryans to be the only purest race, and therefore anyone who was a non-Aryan was executed in Hitler's Germany. So the Jews, who were considered as traitors, betrayers of the government, they were caught up and brought to the concentration camp and then murdered, and lakhs of Jews lost their lives or lost their families during this misrule of Hitler. So our poet is comparing the Jews, the condition of the Jews, to the condition of the Kikiyu people in Africa, because they are also losing their life. Thousands and thousands of the local Africans are losing their life because of the colonial dominance of the Europeans. So that is why the poet is comparing them to the Jews. So our poet is asking that, will it really matter, these kind of statistics and these kind of historical analysis of the colonial policies, will it really stop the violence on the part of the savages, on the part of the Africans? Will they understand it and stop their violence? No, they will not. Till they have got independence, they will continue this violence. They will continue to sacrifice their lives and their own brothers' lives in order to get independence of the land. So our poet says that it does not matter. Coming to the second stanza. Threshed out by beaters, the long rushes break in the white dust of ibisses whose cries have wheeled since the civilization's dawn. Now, here our poet is starting the description with a detailed description of the hunting. Now, once upon a time, when the Britishers had not yet come to Africa, the people of the tribes in Africa, the Kikiyu tribe or any other tribal people, they used to go for hunting. So how they started their hunt? They started beating the drums. Dhols or drums were present, and the people started beating their drums and they started thumping their feet on the ground. This would produce vibration, this would produce a loud noise, and the animals which are hiding in the grasslands of the veldt, they will, in fear, they will come out of the grasslands to the plains, and the people will be able to spot them. Immediately they will attack the animals with their bows and arrows and kill the animals. So this is how the huntings used to take place in ancient Africa. So our poet is starting the description, the second paragraph, with a description of the hunting. He says, to threshed out by beaters. Threshed means to beat. You must have seen how people beat the drum, the dhol, the tabla with their hands. So similarly, the Africans also started beating their drums. Beaters means the people who beat the drums. The long rushes break in a white dust of ibisses, and because of that loud noise produced by the beating of the drum, the birds and the animals in the forest and the grassland become afraid and they start running here and there. So the poet is mentioning one particular bird which is generally the favorite for hunting, that is the ibis. So you can see the picture of the ibis has been given to you in the screen. It is a white colored bird, and this is one of the most common birds found in Africa, particularly in the grasslands of Africa. This is a very common bird and one of the favorite birds for hunting. Its flesh is eaten by the people. So as the ibises hear this noise of the beating of drums, they start running here and there. They start running in order to save their lives. They cry out in agony and pain when they are hurt by the arrows, and this has been happening since civilization's dawn. That means since the beginning of African civilization, since the beginning when the people of Africa settled there, when the different tribes started living in Africa, they have been hunting animals and birds like this. The cries, the agony of the animals have always haunted the fields of Africa like this. Now, why suddenly the poet refers to this particular bird ibis? Because you can see the picture, it is white in color, and obviously it is referring to the Europeans, the white skinned Britishers. So when indirectly the poet is describing the war, the attack of the Kikiyu tribe on the Europeans. So when the Kikiyu tribals start their attack, launch their attack on the Europeans, they launch it by beating drums and suddenly, all of a sudden, they start shooting arrows on the scared European soldiers. So it will take some time for the European soldiers to prepare their guns and all, but even before they could do that, the Kikiyu tribes will surprise them with the attack and shoot arrows at them. So the condition of the ibises who cry out in pain in Africa is compared to the condition of the soldiers, the European soldiers attacked by the Kikiyu tribals. But here, one more thing has to be understood. The poet is trying to say that the Africans have been quite habituated to violence and slaughter right from the beginning of the civilization. Once upon a time, when the Britishers were not there, they were celebrating by killing animals. They were hunting animals and killing them. So they have always been thirsty for blood. Earlier they satisfied this thirst by killing animals, and now they are satisfying this thirst by killing human beings, by killing the Britishers. So here it is very clear that our poet is not supporting the African tribals also. At the beginning, at the first stanza itself, he has clearly said that he is not supporting the Europeans because they came from outside and they disturbed the peace of Africa. In the second stanza, the poet is justifying that he is not even supporting the African tribals. The violence that the tribals are doing cannot be justified. Maybe they are fighting for a right cause. Their cause is correct, but the way they are fighting is not correct. Otherwise, why would they go and kill a little child who is innocent, who is harmless, who has not done anything wrong? That is why our poet is condemning the violent attitude of the people from the Kikiyu tribe. So he uses a lot of metaphors, I told you. Here the hunting metaphor has been used, hunting of the ibises. And this has been going on since the beginning of African civilization, killing of animals and now killing of men. From the parched river or the beast teeming plains. So parched means dry, and beast teeming plain means, beast means animal, teeming means full of. So the plains of Africa, the forests of Africa, which are full of animals, and the dry river belts, from there often the cries of these animals or birds come floating when the Kikiyu tribals go for attacking or hunting. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. Very, very important line in the poem. The poet says that animal attacking another animal is quite natural. That is the law of the jungle. In order to survive, a lion must hunt the deer. If a lion makes friend with the deer or the rabbit, it will not be able to survive. So in order to survive, nature has made the rule that the lion should hunt and eat the deer. Similarly, in order to survive, a snake must eat a rat. So the violence done by one animal upon another animal is justified. It is a natural law. But the violence created by man, and why upright? Upright normally means a man who has a conscience, has a morality. So man is also an animal, but there is a big difference, because man has a properly functional brain which has full of conscience and morality, etc. So despite having so much morality, despite having so much of conscience, man still does violence to others. Man still gives pain to others. But why? What is the reason? Man does not kill other human beings for food, because it is not necessary. Man gets food from plants, man gets fruits from animal, so man does not require to kill other human beings in order to get food. But still he kills other human beings, still he tortures other human beings. Why? Because he wants to get divinity. He tries to find divinity. That means he tries to establish his control. He wants to prove himself as the Lord, most powerful creature. So in order to prove himself, in order to prove his power, man gives pain to others. So this is a clear-cut condemnation of the colonization. we see that the colonizers, that is the European people here, come and attack the Africans, kill them, torture them only because the Europeans want to get more power. It is not for food that they are hunting. Animals hunt for food, and that is natural. But the human beings, particularly the colonizers, they kill people not for food but for power, to get more and more land, to get more and more power. Delirious as these worried beasts, his wars dance to the tightened carcass of a drum, while he calls courage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by dead. Now, these four lines are criticizing both the communities, the white as well as the Africans. So, he says that the Africans are so much mad, they are delirious, they are uncontrolled, they lose their control. When there is a violence, they lose their control, they lose their humanity, and as a result, they start dancing like mad after causing a death. They start celebrating the death of a person by dancing like mad. Now, here, dance to the tightened carcass of a drum is a very important image. You need to understand how a dhol or a dhak or a drum is made. Basically, it has a cylindrical structure, but on both the sides of the cylinder, a covering is made with the skin of animals. So, it is an instrument which normally people used in celebration. But see the irony, the instrument which you are using for celebration is actually made on the dead body of some other creature. Carrion means the dead body, carcass means here the dead body. So the skin of some dead animal is plucked out, and with that skin the covering, the sides of the dhak or the dhol or the drum is made. And sometimes it was also believed that in Africa, the comes from the dead bodies by taking the skin from the dead bodies of human beings also, not only from animals. So our poet says that the African people have become so brutal in their pursuit for freedom that they are tearing out the skin from the body of man, making drum out of that skin, beating that drum and dancing, celebrating, enjoying the death. So death is something that should be mourned, not celebrated or danced. But here, instead of mourning the death, the people, the African people, the tribals are beating their drums and dancing and celebrating. Now, whenever a poet from a particular region writes a poem in this post-colonial literature, we will see that they celebrate the practices of their community. If a poet from our Santal Paragonas will be writing about the Santal Uprising, he will be very proud of his dhamshas and madols, which are musical instruments of the Santal community. He will not condemn these music of the Santals. But our poet Derek Walcott is completely taking a different view. Instead of celebrating the heritage of the Kikiyu tribe, instead of celebrating the heritage of the African society, he is condemning the violence of the Africans. According to him, the practice of beating drums and dancing after the death of a person is not at all a happy feature, not at all a happy thing, and it is rather very gross and very violent. And on the other hand, he is also condemning the attitude of the white people. The white people are trying to kill as many Africans as possible because they are saying that we are killing the Africans in order to establish peace. Now, the Africans are fighting against them, protesting them, trying to stop their colonial rule in Africa. So in order to prevent that, in order to prevent the Africans from fighting, in order to spread peace in the continent, what are the Britishers doing? They are killing the African altogether. So if more and more Africans die, what will happen? There will be peace because the dead bodies will not be able to protest. So that is what our poet is saying, that the white peace contracted by the death. That means the people of Europe are trying to impose peaceful situation in Africa by killing the common people of Africa who are trying to revolt against them. So he is condemning both the Africans as well as the white people for their violence. Coming to the last stanza of the poem, again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of compassion. Brutish means inhuman. So he says, here he is speaking about the Europeans. So he says the Europeans, on one hand, they murdered the Africans, and on the other hand, they clear the blood in their hand. After you commit a murder, your hands are blood soaked. Now, obviously, all the time it is not blood soaked. If you are killing with a gun, your hands are not blood soaked. But still, it is a metaphor that if your hands are bloody, that means you have done a murder. Maybe not really bloody, but metaphorically or symbolically bloody. So the Europeans are cleaning their blood soaked hands on the excuse. Here napkin means the excuse. So here they have an excuse that we are killing the Africans in order to establish peace in Africa. We are killing the Africans because we want to establish proper order and law in this country. Africa is an uncivilized and savage nation, so we have come here as Europeans. It is our responsibility to teach the African people about society, culture, civilization. So we have brought the light of civilization in the life of the barbaric Africans. That is, some victims are dying, some people are dying. It is not a big deal. So they are simply wiping their hands off from the murder of the Africans. They are not considering themselves guilty. They are not feeling sorry for killing the Africans. Rather, they are wiping their hands off by saying that we have done it for the good of Africa, not for the bad of Africa. So the poet is using a metaphor here. The red hands of the colonizers, the blood-stained hands of the colonizers are wiped by a napkin of the dirty cause. This metaphor is trying to mean that the Europeans are on one hand killing the Africans, and on the other hand they are trying to wipe off their hands from the murder of the Africans by justifying that we are doing this for the good of Africa. Again, a waste of our compassion as with Spain. Our poet says that in order to favor the brutal African people or the cruel European people is a waste of compassion. He thinks that showing sympathy to the African is also not worth it. Showing sympathy for the Europeans is also not worth it, because both of them are violent, both of them are torturing each other, and none of them can be called just or correct. Maybe, as I said, maybe the cause with which the Africans are fighting, that cause is justified, that cause is correct, but the never be justified in the eyes of our poet. And that is why our poet says that it is a waste of compassion. Compassion means pity or sympathy. So I cannot take any side. I cannot sympathize with the Britishers, I cannot sympathize with the Africans, because both are very, very violent. If I sympathize with anyone, it will be a mistake. It is like the case of Spain. Now, what is the case of Spain? Here again we get a historical allusion. So the poet is referring to the civil war that took place in Spain. During the civil war, Spain, two areas of Spain were fighting against each other to get supremacy in the country, to get the domination of the country in their hands. Now, other European countries like France or England, they signed a treaty, they signed a deal that we will not interfere in this internal matter of Spain. This is their personal matter, internal issue. We will not interfere in this matter. Let them end this matter themselves. Let them end this problem themselves. But despite the neutral stand taken by France and England, it was not solved so easily, because the war still continued. Both the parties which were fighting in the civil war, they got supply of weapons from countries like Germany. Secretly, Germany started supplying weapons to one of the parties, and therefore the war continued, the war became very brutal. So the neutrality that was taken by France and Britain was just a wastage, nothing beneficial. Similarly, our poet also says that if I try to take any side, if I try to sympathize with the Britishers or sympathize with the local people of Africa, it will be a wastage of my sympathy. Just like the wastage of Spanish War, similarly this would also be a wastage. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman. Another metaphor, gorilla is referring to Africa and Superman is referring to the British. Why is Africa referred to gorilla? Because gorilla is wild, gorilla is related closer to nature, and similarly the Africa is also wild, powerful, natural. So Africa is compared to the gorilla, and with the gorilla is fighting with Superman, because the British really considered themselves as Superman. They had developed technology after the Industrial Revolution to such an extent that they considered themselves more powerful than anybody in the whole world. They had such superb technology to fight battles. So it was a very unequal fight, because on one side the gorilla was fighting with its bare arms without any weapon, and on the other hand the Superman was fighting with the most advanced technology of warfare. So in order to show the inequality in the war, in the battle, the power of the gorilla fighting with the Superman. Often we have seen that in the cartoons also. I who am poisoned turn divided to the vein. Now the poet brings himself in the poem and asks a complicated question. He asks that I have the blood of. Remember, I told you that he is half British and half African, grandfather British and grandmother African. So he says that in my body I carry the blood of both the countries, both the groups. On one hand the group, the Europeans, and on the other hand the Africans. My blood has been poisoned. Why he calls his blood poisoned? Because at this moment both the Europeans as well as the Africans are full of hatred, and that hatred is compared by the poet to poison. So he says that my blood is full of poison right now. So, and poison of not one side but both the sides. So on which direction shall I turn? On which side shall I support? I am divided to the very vein of my body. That means the very blood in my body is divided. Half European, half African. So I cannot. I remember when I had given you the introduction to post-colonial literature, I pointed out that hybridity becomes a very important issue in the post-colonial literature. So this is exactly the hybridity we are talking about. He is a hybrid between the European and the African cultures, and in such a situation he cannot totally justify the aggression of the Europeans, nor can he justify the violence of the Africans. He cannot take sides. So he says, I who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose America and the English tongue I love. He says that yes, I have abused the Britishers for doing wrong in Africa. The drunken British officers, when they tortured my African brothers and sisters, when they killed the Africans in drunkard situation, I had condemned that, I had criticized that. But at the same time, I have accepted English as a language of my life. How can I leave this English language behind? Once again, I will go remind you that in the lecture about the I have spoken about the question of language, the colonizers' language. The colonizers came from their country, colonized a new country, and brought their language with it. So when the Britishers came to India, they brought English, and today Kamala Das is saying that it has become my own language. It is the language in which I express my thoughts and feelings. It is my language, let me speak it as it is. Don't stop me from speaking it. Same idea is reflected here also. Derek Walcott is also raising the same concern. He is trying to say that I have developed a hybrid culture. Though I am African by geography, but by my tongue, by my language, I am English. I am speaking the English tongue and I love my English language. How can I condemn this language? How can I altogether forget this language? It is a heritage. So clearly he is trying to say that I cannot take one side, either the side of the British or the side of the Africans. I cannot take any one side. So what is the betray them both or give back what they give? So what shall I do? Shall I betray both of them? Shall I cheat the Britishers also and the Africans also, turn my back towards them, go away from the situation, run away from the situation? Or shall I repay them what they had both given to me? It can be positive also, negative also. How can I face such a slaughter and be quiet? How can I turn from Africa and live? So the concluding couplet is very interesting. He says that it is impossible. I have a humanitarian soul, and it is impossible for me to quietly accept the slaughter both of African as well as European lives. I can't sit quietly and see people dying in front of my own eyes. Slaughter means murdering, killing. So I can't see that quietly. How can I sit and watch people killing each other like this? And then last he says, how can I turn from Africa and survive and live? So it is not possible for me to go away from Africa and live. It is not possible for me to turn my face away from my heritage, from my culture, from my country. I love my country, I respect my country, but at the same time I cannot support the violence happening in my country. The violence which is caused by both the sides, by the Europeans also and the Africans also. I cannot accept this violence. So this is a very different take on the post-colonial discussion. Normally I told you when I gave you the introduction that post-colonial literature will always glorify the freedom struggle. They will always justify that yes, the freedom struggle was necessary to throw away the foreign rule. But here our poet is questioning the freedom struggle itself. He asks that, is it really correct to sacrifice so many lives on the part of the local people also? Or is it correct for colonizers to come and destroy another civilization which was existing in peace before they had arrived? Now coming to the title, very interesting title, A Far Cry from Africa. What is far cry? Normally far cry is an expression which means an useless cry. When you cry far away, suppose you are crying alone in the forest, nobody will able to listen to your cries, nobody will be able to go and help you. So if you are crying from the far away, it is a useless cry. So maybe our poet is saying that his mourning for the death of the people in Africa as well as the death of the European people is useless without any reason. It will have no impact. It will neither stop the Europeans from doing violence, nor it will stop the Africans from doing violence. So it is a far cry, it is a wastage, useless cry. Or it can also mean that it is a distanced cry. That means he is viewing Africa not as an insider, but rather as an insider outsider. Now what is insider outsider? A person who neither belongs completely at the inside of the continent nor belongs totally outsider. He is neither a Britisher who is an outsider nor a fully African who is an insider. He has a mixed blood, he is a hybrid, so he is an insider outsider. That means he is viewing the situation from a very neutral point of view, neither biased towards the Africans nor biased towards the Europeans. That can also be suggested in the title. Thank you.